But during Saturday night, we're going to see those spells of rain push south into northern and western England, Wales as well. Again, some heavy bursts at times, but increasingly that rain is becoming more fragmented as it moves south. Nevertheless, the extensive cloud across the UK by dawn tomorrow means that it's going to be a frost-free start. Temperatures in some places hold up at 10 Celsius. And in the far southeast, I think it'll stay dry through much of the day. Scotland and Northern Ireland also brightening up, drying up, some bright spells coming through, albeit with a few showers here and there. Likewise, eventually for Northern England. But elsewhere, well, we keep the dreary skies, we keep the damp conditions. That'll impact the temperatures. Just 11 Celsius there in Cardiff, 11 in Plymouth, I think 13 or 14 further north, feeling a bit more pleasant. And Bank Holiday Monday itself doesn't look too bad. I think there'll be sunny spells, but a scattering of showers. It'll feel a little warmer again, highs of 16 Celsius.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil on GB News. Coming up on today's show,
we're discussing what's turned out to be a turbulent week in Westminster, with accusations of harassment running rife and a claim that an MP was caught watching pornography in the chamber.
We're also talking about the High Court's ruling this week, which said that the government policy on discharging untested patients from hospitals to care homes at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic was unlawful.
That plus much more after your latest news.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Conservative MP who allegedly watched porn on his phone suggests he may have opened the video accidentally. Neil Parish is rejecting calls to stand down despite having the Tory whip suspended. The MP for Tiverton and Honiton says he will wait for the outcome of a parliamentary standards inquiry before considering his position.
I think the Whip's office will do a thorough investigation and we will wait and see that result. And I think, from that, then the decision will have to be made what action to be taken.
Labour is accusing a Conservative MP of wasting police time following calls for an investigation into claims Sir Keir Starmer broke COVID restrictions during lockdown. The Shadow Education Secretary told GB News Tory MPs were trying to pull the party into the gutter ahead of the local elections. Police have investigated the gathering, which took place at a constituency office in Durham in April last year, and decided no rules were broken. Bridget Phillipson says there's no comparison between that and the Downing Street parties.
Police have looked into the matter. There's no case to answer. No rules were broken. I can see why Tory MPs ahead of the local elections want to spend their time seeking to drag us all into the gutter and make out that we're all the same. But really, you look at the number of fines that have been issued at Downing Street, the fact that the Prime Minister lied to the British people, that he's lied to Parliament, that we've got the only Prime Minister in modern times to have broken the law to still be in office, and understand just why they're getting so desperate around this. Tory MP should know better than to waste police time on this.
The acting Premier of the British Virgin Islands insists there's no need for London to impose direct rule over the territory. It follows an inquiry set up in the wake of corruption allegations against the Premier, Andrew Fahey. He has appeared in a US court last night over alleged drug trafficking and money laundering charges. The US has accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of brutality and depravity in his 2-month invasion of Ukraine. A Pentagon spokesman says violent and cruel acts have been committed against innocent civilians with utter disregard for their lives. Meanwhile, the UK Ministry of Defence says Moscow has been forced to merge and redeploy depleted military units after failed advances in northeast Ukraine. The brother of Kyiv's mayor, Vladimir Klitschko, says he's seen evidence of Russian war crimes in Ukraine.
Tortured, executed bodies of civilians with their hands tied behind their back on their knee and executed with the headshots. I've seen it with my own eyes, many, hundreds of dead civilians. It's just horrifying.
A cross-party committee is warning reforms are needed to stop hostile states buying access to MPs through all-party parliamentary groups. It comes after MI5 revealed that a female spy had been instrumental in setting up the Chinese in Britain group. The Common Standards Committee has warned significant changes are needed to avoid what they're calling the next great parliamentary scandal. The Met Police is launching a new bid to overturn a High Court ruling which found officers breached the rights of organisers of the Sarah Everard Vigil in 2021. Scuffles broke out at the event between police and some of those taking part in the vigil. Reclaim These Streets has criticised the force for spending more taxpayer money after Scotland Yard said it would take the case to the Court of Appeal. However, the Met says its appeal focuses on decisions and communication with Reclaim These Streets ahead of the event. A bid to overturn Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking conviction has failed. That's despite her lawyers arguing that one of the jurors was biased after he failed to disclose he was a victim of sexual abuse. The judge concluded the juror was fair and impartial in the original court case. The Transport Secretary says he wants to banish the boy racer. Grant Shapps is announcing plans to install noise cameras in England and Wales's loudest streets. They'll automatically detect when vehicle exhausts are breaking legal sound levels and catch rowdy drivers revving their engines. A tiny village with a population of 400 in Northumberland has won Britain's best beach for the second year in a row. Bamborough boasts a historic castle, cricket pitch and miles of clean sand, which won it the top UK seaside spot in a survey by consumer group Which. Looks lovely. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. We have a great show lined up for you today. We're, of course, looking back at what was an edifying week in Parliament, which has seen MP Neil Parish being accused of watching pornography whilst in the chamber.
We're joined by a care home owner to discuss the High Court's ruling this week that government COVID policies were unlawful. We'll also be asking him what those dark days were like in care homes at the start of the COVID pandemic in 2020.
We'll also be joined by the author of a recent study which said the UK healthcare system is falling behind other countries. Plus,
who could forget that iconic tune? Well, Carol Decker, the woman behind that incredible voice, will be here to tell us about the Saturday jobs she used to have.
and we want to hear from you today. So get involved with the conversation. Please email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can always tweet us at gbnews, and we want to hear where you're getting in touch with us from. Now, joining us to go through the week's news stories is journalist and contributor to The Telegraph and Express, Robert Taylor. So, Robert, what's been catching your eyes this week?
Well, it's difficult to avoid Parliament this week, isn't it? And you two know all about that. My goodness, what a strange old week in Parliament. And we started with the Angela Rayner story, and apparently Tory MPs have been saying that she's trying to distract Boris Johnson at the dispatch box, which is peculiar. When I saw it, I wondered if it was an April Fool, quite frankly. I just couldn't believe it was true. But apparently this comes from a real Tory source. But the bit that I'm interested in was reported in The Guardian and one or two others earlier in this week that the Mail on Sunday editor has rejected a meeting with the Speaker over the story. And I think the Mail on Sunday editor is right to do that, because this is about freedom of the media. The Mail on Sunday got a story, they reported it, it comes from a source. Why on earth shouldn't they report it? And they shouldn't really be hauled before the Speaker of the House of Commons to answer for themselves when they're just doing their job. But that is what freedom of the media is all about. Yes, it might have been a bit of a grubby story, but it was based on something that was actually said. And I think it is quite right that the Mail on Sunday editor should refuse to meet up with Lindsay Hoyle.
I mean, look, I support the Speaker. I voted for the Speaker. I think you voted for the Speaker in the election, and I'm a fan of his. I think he's impartial. He's a good guy. I'm a big supporter of his. I think he got this wrong. If I'm honest, I think he got this wrong. And quite clearly the Mail on Sunday should have the right to be able to publish a story that a source gives them, as long as it's true, and there's no reason to doubt that it's true. So I don't see, I think he got this wrong. Maybe, though, just, should the editor have gone to see him? I mean, the editor could have gone and had a... I mean, I find the Speaker to be a perfectly reasonable person. You can have a reasonable conversation with him. The Mail on Sunday editor could have gone and said, look, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's any of your business. We'll have a cup of tea, and this is why I don't think it's any of your business. I understand the principle, but was there really a need to snub him? Could he not have...
He didn't need to take direction from him about what he would put in the paper, but you could have seen him to both sides understand what they thought was unedifying. It was slightly vulgar, the story. But what I find interesting now about the papers and how things are reported, it is like you want a ding-dong to carry throughout the week, because as the week rumbled on, this seemed like a very old story. It seemed there were multiple people who had heard even Angela Rayner herself talking about it in one way or another, whether it was tongue-in-cheek, whether it was just talk on the terrace. So I think everybody wants to rush to a conclusion, which side of the argument you're on, whose side, whether it's, Labour side, Tory side, you want to rush to a conclusion, and then you see it bounce around the papers all week. And that's what I think at the moment is disturbing, really, is that sort of immediate sort of choosing to side on one side or the other and not get all the full facts or blow it out of proportion.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit guilty of this myself, because I did write a column about this in The Telegraph in the midweek. And my view is that the Mail on Sunday were right to say, look, Lindsay Hoyle, stay out of this. This is our business, not yours. But I do agree with you. Lindsay Hoyle, 100% better than his predecessor. No doubt about that. I'm a big fan. But I just think he overreached in this instance, and it really is no business of his.
And I think it is that overreaching, and I think it is everybody calling for something immediately, not getting the facts, not looking at it with a sort of a cool head in the cold light of day. Everybody now, wants something done immediately. I think that's part of the problem.
It is, and we've seen this morning with the Porn MP as well. Everyone wants him to resign immediately. We need to get the facts first.
Now, that moves me on very nicely, Robert, because whilst all this has been going on in Parliament, you'll be relieved to know that the House of Commons and the House of Lords have been getting their priorities right. Yeah, they've been focusing on the important stuff. And they've come up with a brand new language guide for people in Parliament about the things that you can say and the things that you can't say. And, I mean, I don't know, who comes up with this drivel? Lord only knows. But here's some of the things you're now no longer allowed to say in the staff in the House of Commons. You're no longer to talk about ladies and gentlemen. You've got to talk about folks or colleagues. You know, when you start a speech now, it's not ladies and gentlemen, it's folks and colleagues. You can't refer to guys. It's got to be everyone or people. You can't talk about wife or husband. You're no longer my wife, Esther.
Phew, that's a relief. You might find I was on one of the panel sorting these terms out.
You are my spouse or partner. You can't refer to class. You can't ask somebody what their class is. You've got to ask what their socio-economic status is. Rolls off the tongue well. You can't refer to pensioners. You've got to talk about older adults. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, all of this stuff, isn't it? I mean, what I want to know is, with all this political correctness stuff, and about the things that you can say and who you can't say, I've always wanted to know who's on the committee that decides what's offensive and what isn't offensive. Who is on the... How do you get yourself onto this committee? Because we're always told all the time, aren't we? This word is offensive, this word isn't offensive, these phrases are offensive. Who decides? I want to know who decides, and I want to get myself on this panel.
Why is women better than ladies? Why is it folks is better than ladies and gentlemen? You're quite right, but what I can't get over, how much time has this wasted? How many panels would be involved? How many people would be involved? How much consultation was involved? Do you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see the DVLA getting the licences sorted. I'd like passports getting the licences sorted. I'd like these people here to go and help the country get back up and running after COVID.
Are you politically correct?
I'm afraid I'm not terribly, no.
See the way you've got to say, I'm afraid I'm not. Instead of saying, I'm not.
I've fallen
at the first.
No, I don't see anything wrong with ladies and gentlemen. I really don't. In formal circumstances, why not? It's not offensive to anyone. For heaven's sake, let's get a life here.
I've got another one, completely different again, but it made me smile. It was in the Mail this week, and it goes from wild nights out to well-being, and it's all about those, I'll say, ladies, because I'm not allowed to, so I'm going to break the rules and call them ladies, back in the sort of 90s, early noughties, known as the ladettes. So you had your Kate Moss, your Meg Matthews, your Zoe Ball, your Sarah Cox, and those ladettes who were feisty women, weren't they? So this is talking about how much better they look now and how they've changed into well-being sort of gurus. But I'm really interested in those feisty females. What happened to them? What have we got now? So I think about it. So I would have been probably one of these, a ladette, a feisty female in the 90s.
You still are. You still are. I don't say I was. You still are.
And then I think 60s, 70s, my mum there would have been sort of, you know, a feminist. She would have been burning a bra and all of that. And then you would have had, in the 80s, those dynamic women going out for the first time, sort of first woman to sort of, you know, be on the London Stock Exchange, first woman to set up a PLC. But I'm just wondering, as we've got into the sort of 2020s, who are those feisty women? What have we got? Because it seems to me we've just got the sort of the Kim Kardashians, and it's all about photo shoots, Instagram, and very much the physical appearance. I want to know where our feisty women have gone and who are they now?
I can't help you with that, Esther. I have no idea. But I also think, where are today's feisty women going to be in 20 years' time? Will they also be forgotten? Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Let's hope that people can get a career that lasts and stay in the public eye if that's what they want.
Well, I don't know why you're saying where have all the feisty women gone, because you're here and all your friends are all feisty women, so I don't know why you're saying where...
Well, they need a higher platform. They need a bigger platform. I'm all for feisty women.
Robert, I think you were intrigued about people dining alone.
Yes. Well, there was a story in the Express earlier this week about a woman who was humiliated because she was turned away from a pizza restaurant for dining alone. She's a head teacher, and she went to a pizza restaurant at the end of a busy day and decided she'd just go on her own. Why not? And she was turned away because the pizza restaurant had, and I quote, a no singles policy. Where does that come from? A no singles policy for just eating in a restaurant? It's crazy. And is this about a stigma against single diners? Possibly. Have you ever come across that before?
Well, I used to, when I worked for Asda, before I became an MP, I used to go travelling all around the country, visiting our stores, and I used to stay over in hotels. And I used to always go out, and I used to find the local Indian restaurant and sit there. I always felt a bit self-conscious about it, if I'm honest. But not because I thought I was going to be kicked out. I just thought it looks as if I was a sado with no friends or anything. But
it's wrong. I mean, you used to have the single supplement you still do on room booking, etc. I get that. But I'm afraid if you want to dine alone, we're happy to see that happen. Robert, we're going to come back to you in the 11 o'clock hour, see what you've seen in the papers today. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's been a turbulent week in Westminster with reports of sleaze running rife, including harassment of female MPs, as well as a story of an MP watching pornography.
It comes after an article was published in the Mail on Sunday, which some Tory MPs accused Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner of purposely distracting Boris Johnson by showing her legs. It led to the widespread condemnation from both sides, with many claiming overt sexism and misogyny was at play. Rayner herself described the article as sexist and steeped in classism.
It comes in the wake of reports suggesting 56 MPs, including 3 cabinet ministers, are facing claims of sexual misconduct.
Joining us now to discuss the developments is founder of the campaign group Can't Buy My Silence, and that's Zelda Perkins. Good to have us with you here today. Now, some of the ministers in the House have talked about this as being men in positions of power, talking about it being the abuse of men in power. How have you been viewing this, Zelda, particularly as you were the lady who came out and said, you can't buy my silence, Harvey Weinstein?
I think the most disturbing thing about this is we're talking about 56 MPs. That's 10% of the House. Now, if you look at any other business or corporation, I'm not sure how they would be behaving if 10% of their workforce was being investigated for sexual misconduct. I think this also shows the environment, unfortunately, that is the House at the moment, that is Westminster. But if you imagine any other public company with 10% of their workforce being investigated, I think there would be a much larger outcry. And this is also, it's a cross-party issue. This isn't just the Conservatives, it's Labour too. I think there are 2 Labour front benchers, 3 members of the cabinet, and it's really not acceptable.
One of the things, Zelda, that you campaign about is non-disclosure agreements, and the fact that sometimes the poor behaviour, unacceptable behaviour of people is covered up and hidden by the signing of non-disclosure agreements. Can you tell us about, perhaps your experience with Harvey Weinstein and basically how he was able to get away with so much for so long because of non-disclosure agreements largely?
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing is if we're seeing 56 MPs, 10% of the House being investigated, imagine how many people are being silenced or gagged within Westminster or are too afraid to come forward. So this really can only be the tip of the iceberg. I was silenced for 20 years, having signed a non-disclosure agreement with Harvey Weinstein, and I think one of the most horrific things that people don't understand about non-disclosure agreements is that the real harm starts once you sign that agreement, because you can then no longer own your trauma. You can't speak to the people that you need to speak about to get support from. Apparently this has changed, but nothing has changed. Nothing has changed at all at the moment. No legislation has changed. No regulation has changed. So it is perfectly acceptable for anybody in a position of power to pay somebody, bargain with them for their silence to protect their own reputation and hide abuse. Now, for the system to do that is much more disturbing than the individual poor behaviour of an employer or employee. If the system is actually protecting the people that are abusing, then we're in really big trouble. And as far as I can see, nothing has advanced since I broke my non-disclosure agreement in 2017. The government, Theresa May's government, had a public consultation, but none of those recommendations has been taken up. The SRA, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, have not changed their rulings. So at the moment, anybody in a position of power is still free to wield that tool of using an NDA in an unethical manner and keeping silent somebody who is a victim of some form of discrimination, abuse or harassment.
And Zelda, you were very, very brave in terms of breaking that non-disclosure agreement and pursuing the solicitor who organised the non-disclosure agreement for Harvey Weinstein, and we should all pay tribute to you for that, because lots of people wouldn't have done that, and you did shine a light on what was going on. I just wondered, do you think Parliament's any different from any other workplace? I mean, the difference in Parliament is that obviously we get to find out all of these things. It all gets reported to a committee, it all gets published. Is it that different to any other workplace, do you think? And are these things happening in every workplace and we just don't know about them?
These things are happening in every workplace, and I think the difference with Parliament, and forgive me because I haven't spent very much time in there, when I have spent time in there, it seems like a pretty impressive place, but Parliament, Westminster, should be held to a higher standard than any other business in the country, and that's non-negotiable. Our MPs, you are our employees, essentially. You are there to help us, to represent us, to make our country a better place, to work towards that. And we put our trust in you to do that. And that does mean that you have to hold yourselves to a higher standard of behaviour. And if you don't have the ability to do that, you don't have a place, you shouldn't have a place in Westminster. And, you were talking earlier about the MP who was caught looking at porn on his phone, who's saying that he opened that by mistake. Well, frankly, that's not an excuse. I actually don't think you should have phones on the floor in the house. You're there to debate and to be dealing with business of state. And if he opened his phone and the last thing that he happened to be looking at was porn, then he was clearly doing that in his office beforehand. So, in any other situation, he would be held to account. And I believe that people in Westminster should be held to a higher level.
I think you're sharing the views there of most of our viewers and most of the public. We are in a place of leadership, and of course that's exactly what we should be doing, and that's why they're now going to look at the code of conduct and what really how those codes should be viewed in this day and age. Zelda, I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in today, for sharing your experiences and for having your say on what's been happening in the House of Commons.
And I should just say for completeness that it's been well reported that 56 MPs have been reported for sexual misconduct. I'm not sure where that figure's come from, but I should say that yesterday the Joe Willows, the director of the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, which looks into these allegations in Parliament, sent out an email to every MP saying, and it said this: over the last couple of weeks, we've seen reports and speculation in the media about the current number of ICGS cases against MPs. Last year, we confirmed in our annual report there were 15 cases against MPs for bullying, harassment or sexual misconduct from July 2020 to June 2021. We are seeing a similar trend in disclosures so far this year. Final figures will be published in our annual report. So that might suggest there aren't 56 or anything close. It may be...
We're not saying 15 is great either, but it's a lot less. And again, it's about getting the facts right and the stories right. Well, coming up on Saturday morning with Esther and Phil, we're joined by a care home owner to discuss the High Court's ruling this week that government COVID policies were in fact unlawful. And we also want to hear from you. So if you want to get involved, give us your views on what we've been talking about this morning or your views on that care home subject, please do send them to GBViews at GBNews or tweet us at GBNews.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. Many of you have been getting in touch.
Graham Shaw says no. The male editor, should not have gone to see the Speaker. It was a massive overreach by the Speaker, and when someone overreaches, you should never condone their bad behaviour by pandering to them. The Speaker should instead be chastised and told what his actual remit is.
And John Taylor says, I think the Speaker is terrible. There's something about the role that makes them think they are elevated to the status of God, and Lindsay Hoyle seems no different. So lots of you have various opinions there, or quite harsh opinions on what the reach of the Speaker should be.
Now, this week, the High Court ruled that government policy on discharging untested patients from hospitals to care homes at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic was unlawful.
The legal challenge was brought about by Dr Kathy Gardner and Faye Harris, who both lost their fathers to COVID. The two said there had been failures in protecting elderly care home residents from the virus, with Dr Gardner saying the homes had been neglected and let down by the government.
Back in 2020, Matt Hancock, who was Health Secretary at the time, said this about care homes.
Right from the start, it's been clear that this horrible virus affects older people most. So right from the start, we've tried to throw a protective ring around our care homes.
Well, joining us now to discuss the ruling and indeed those dark days at the start of the pandemic is David Crabtree, the owner of Crabtree Care Homes. David, the ruling this week was quite a landmark ruling, I guess. I know you raised this at the start of the pandemic yourself. What's your take on this, and can you sort of cast our minds back to what things were like in your care homes at the start of the pandemic?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to give time to this, because the ruling vindicates everything we were saying. In fact, you may recall I wrote to my local MP, Mr Philip Davis, on many occasions saying that we should have a fire break between discharge and into care homes. What happened was many of our residents were actually in hospital for medical reasons. And the remit came out on the 28th of March that all non-urgent cases were to be discharged. That meant that they had to come back home. It wasn't a case that we could say we're refusing admission. This was their home. We'd cared for these people for several years. They would not test them despite being in hospital, and everybody knowing that there was asymptomatic patients in hospital. The Select Committee was told on the 26th of March by Professor Doyle that patients had 5 days, possibly, before they showed any symptoms.
So when the line came out from, Matt Hancock and the department, they didn't know about the asymptomatic sort of transmissions. When they said they didn't know about that until later and very much viewed it as a Public Health England failure. What did you have to say about that, David?
I would ask you the question, really. How can a minister whose own scientific group reported in January and February that there were asymptomatic patients, that we had witnessed what had happened in care homes across Italy, France and Spain in February, how could a minister not be informed by his own scientific advisory committee that there was no asymptomatic patients? When we've known about Typhoid Mary since 18 dot, how do that flu can be transmitted without people having symptoms? How did he not know?
Yeah, I mean, he clearly did know, David, and I can confirm that you did write to me on a number of occasions at the time. This isn't Captain Hindsight from you. You did actually write to me at the time and tell me what a disaster this was. I just wonder, why do you think that people didn't listen? Why do you think that the government didn't listen to the points that you were making and I was making on your behalf as your MP? Why do you think that everyone ignored those warnings?
I think you had to weigh up what the fear was, is that the general population, the younger general population, could in fact catch COVID and we wouldn't have enough beds. I understand that, I get that. What we should have done is produced a fire break where you were discharged into hospitals or into hotels and we manned those, or we selected certain care homes where we could have had a fire break. What the bit that the ruling focuses on is the death of the elderly in care homes. 131 social care staff died before April the 20th. They all contracted COVID. Many people were discharged back to their own homes, where home care social care staff went into, unprotected, not knowing, and developed COVID and died. There is a much bigger case than the ruling, because there will be many relatives of social care staff who now feel aggrieved and possibly should seek legal advice.
And they talk about as well, as I said, 20,000 people died in the care homes between March and June in 2020. I mean, it's significant numbers of people there. And the court also said it was irrational that people weren't being tested before they were moved from hospital into the care homes. And I just want to take you back there to March 2020 and April 2020 and what you were going through. As I understand it, there were words like abandoned used by care home owners. Nobody was coming in, whether that was nurses or the medical profession. You were in a sort of a lockdown situation. Do you want to explain a little bit about that? Because many people have probably forgotten.
I witnessed what happened in Spain and across Europe, and I closed our doors on the 1st of March. When they were discharging 2 patients back to us, we demanded testing, and they said they would not test, they were asymptomatic. These 2 gentlemen returned to us, and within weeks we had 7, 8 deaths within that care home. We begged the ambulance service to come and take back the patients that now were symptomatic, and we were refused. GPs were turning up into the car park and diagnosing death via Skype. They were asking our carers to put mirrors to people's mouths. Nobody would come in. We were left as just to see what would happen, I think. And of course, what happened is 20,000 died. Our carers were turning up. The vast percentage of care homes in Britain are not nursing homes. They do not carry vast stocks of PPE. District nurses come in and do most procedures in care homes. Therefore, we had no PPE. We were paying £5 a mask on eBay. We were just left. We were bereft. What the rulings brought back is it's re-invoked the anger I had at the time. I thought I'd forgotten about it, but I'm still so angry as to why, when the first job of government is to protect its citizens, to keep them safe. This was a war by any other attrition. 20,000 died as a result of government mismanagement.
Just one final question, David, because we talked about it last week. It's been in all the papers this week, and that is about families visiting the patients in care homes, and it's still not happening in hospitals either, but not happening routinely in care homes. Are you letting family members in? What's going on?
Yes, we take what precautions we can. But again, even now, today, we are left out to dry. We are supposed to, staff are supposed to test twice a week, but they've been left to collect SSP if they test positive. We are allowing visitors in. We welcome it. We want to be back to the family. We are. We're not an institution. We're a home where the visitors are essential to the well-being of all residents in care homes.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you and your residents well.
Now, with rising inflation and supply chain issues being exacerbated by the ongoing war in Ukraine, the prices of items in UK supermarkets have been soaring. But amongst all the doom and gloom, there is a ray of much-needed sunshine as supermarkets are now coming forward and lowering some of their prices, helping people in their hour of need.
Yes, both Asda and Morrisons have announced price reductions on several store items, with the co-owner of Asda, Mohsin Issa, saying his company are committed to doing everything they can to support their customers, colleagues and communities in these exceptionally tough times. Well, joining us to discuss the move is Justin Erkin-Stewart, the co-founder and co-director of Regionally, which is an online investment environment. So, Justin, are supermarkets going to be our saviour in this cost of living crisis?
Supermarkets, saviour? Or are they just in very heavy competition with each other? Yes, I mean, they're all given a jolly good kick up the backside by the likes of Aldi coming in and Lidl, because otherwise, a very cosy little world, 4 or 5 big chains, and they could just about do what they like. And we're all well aware of what some of the agreements have been with supermarkets and farmers. Farmers are always rather wary. Suddenly get a supermarket signing you up, and before you know what happens, the price suddenly gets negotiated down and down. But we're having a sale this month, which means you're paying for it, as opposed to the supermarket suffering. This is a very good idea by supermarkets. If you want to try and win favour and actually show yourself to be part of the community, then this is what they should be trying to do. But don't have to go too far back when you had the old co-op. You know, where it actually was serving as a cooperative. You joined the co-op, you got your divvy, and it was very much community-orientated, much more in the north than it was in the south. But it's interesting to see then maybe supermarkets can adopt a bit more of that and create more of an environment, more of a community. So shop with us, Tesco's or Sainsbury's, whatever it is, and we'll give you more benefit for it. They're strong enough to be able to do so. Some imagination here, and also to improve their reputation. Of course, it's not just food. You look at now the bit in the FT today, 4 in 10 households struggling to pay energy bills. And we know there's more to come.
I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg said this week that supermarkets were making too much profit and they should reduce their price as a result. I think Sainsbury's made £854 million last year. Would you subscribe that they're making too much profit and have a duty to cut their prices?
Well, what they have a duty to do is to serve their customers and community properly. And it's up to these companies to prove the fact that actually they're not profiteering. A good example would be specifically some of the energy companies who have been making extra profits because the price went up, not because they were particularly clever and made some great decisions. That's called luck. And so, therefore, the possibility of windfall tax on them for saying, look, you've benefited from this luck, other people have got bad luck, share it out. But at the same time, you also want companies like Sainsbury's and others to be growing, developing, investing in the future, employing more people. So merely just beating them about with just saying, pay more tax. Let good competition operate, and that will drive prices down. But be wary, we've seen with Tesco's in the past, where they have operated in a monopolistic manner, suddenly changing their name of properties that they own. So you don't know it's actually Tesco's buying it up, or whichever company it was, to try and prevent some of the competitors coming in. So this is where your regulator needs to be absolutely sharp. But equally, us as consumers have our ultimate power as well. Is if you don't like it, go somewhere else, assuming there is somewhere else.
So a supermarket war on prices could be happening then?
Yes, so it should be, quite right too.
And also other ways that we can reduce the prices. I know governments have stepped in as well to say we're going to make the import a lot easier, drop some of those rules there and save another £1 billion. So I know we always have you in whenever we need to know what's going on, Justin. Whenever there's a crisis, we bring you in. So good news in the supermarkets, but it's also what government can do to get those prices down as well. Brilliant as ever, Justin.
Thank you.
Now, coming up after the break, we'll be joined by the author of a recent study which placed the UK near the bottom of a health outcome index. We'll be discussing what can be done to improve the situation. And as always, we want you to hear your views, so please email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or Twitter @gbnews.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:43 and it's Saturday and we're at work. And I'm sure at some point you've worked a weekend as well. But did you have a Saturday job as a kid?
Stacking shelves, working in a hairdresser's or delivering newspapers. What did you do to earn that extra bit of cash of a Saturday? Email us what Saturday jobs you've done, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, I'm sure you'll all remember this.
Don't push too far, your dreams are China in your hand.
Yes, joining us this week to look back on the Saturday jobs she used to have is lead singer of To Bow, Carol Decker. So tell us, what was your first Saturday morning job? Wonderful to see you.
Morning, Esther. Morning, Philip. How are you?
Very good.
Yeah, so a bit like you, Philip, my dad was in the supermarket business and he was an area manager for Tesco. And so I would often go with my dad to whatever supermarket he was working in that weekend. He would be checking up on everybody. And I would just be thrown onto the shop floor and I'd be stacking shelves. And back then, they were very particular about the facing. So all the cans had to face, you know, exactly. You couldn't have one like slightly turned to the left or the right. And someone would, you know, criticise you if that wasn't absolutely perfect. And then I worked for another company called John Menzies when I was 16. So they were a bit like W.H. Smith. So they sold magazines and birthday cards and things like that. And it was utterly terrifying because back then the tills didn't add up for you. So I'd have a whole queue of people and I'd be sort of going 48, 52, £1.76. And I remember nearly ended up in tears once because my arithmetic was so bad and there was a whole queue of people huffing and puffing. But one of the more gory jobs I had at Tesco, because back then they did their own butchery, which they don't do in supermarkets now. So my job was to pull kidneys out of lamb's carcasses, take the membrane off, put them in the little polystyrene container, put the cling film over, take them over the hot wire, cut the hot wire, weigh them, and then put the sticker on. And I used to pride myself on trying to get the sticker perfectly square in the top right-hand corner. And I used to have lots of scarring off the hot wires on my wrists from where I did that. So it looked like I'd been self-harming, which of course I hadn't. So lots and lots and lots of, what was the other one? The weirdest one, a toy factory in Ironbridge, because I moved from Liverpool when I was 7 and grew up in Shropshire. And my job was to put the cambers on boomerangs for this toy factory. And then every now and again, you'd have to throw a test boomerang, but they never came back. I think I was basically just making sticks. But from the age of sweet 16, I had to have a job. My dad said I had to have a job.
Such unglamorous jobs, and then becoming such a glamorous person and going into sort of showbiz singing. But do you think it gave you a strong work ethic going out, seeing what your dad was doing there, going out and doing these jobs?
Definitely. And there's also, I mean, you know, maybe kids are more savvy now, but there's also like figuring out the bus to get to work was an important, you know, part of growing up. How do I get there? How do I get home? And I loved the money. I had my own money and I was allowed to spend that money as I saw fit. So that was very motivating. Yeah.
So how important is money?
I love money, doesn't everybody? I'm not a breadhead as such, but I certainly like to earn money. I like to get paid for my time and I enjoy spending it. You know, I enjoy lovely meals out and a nice bottle of wine or buying a present for my kids or something. We all like money. It eases our lives, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Carol, everyone wants to know about your career, particularly with China in Your Hand, and how what a massive success that was. 5 weeks at number one, keeping George Harrison off the number one spot with his song "Got My Mind Set on You." I just wondered, you released another song, Heart and Soul, I think before China in Your Hand. I think it was from the same album, and that was a big hit in the US as well as the UK too. I just wondered at the time, which did you think was the best song? Which did you think would be the biggest hit?
I've always said this, Heart and Soul is my personal favourite. It's very different. You know, you've got two vocals. It was a production challenge to marry the rap vocal and the melodic vocal. And although China is a huge, beautiful classic that I'm proud to have written and grateful for the attention it still gets and the work I still get as a songwriter, Heart and Soul was a little bit cleverer, you know, so I've always taken a pride in that. And it was our first international hit. And if you have a big hit in America, it sort of jettisons you across the world. And it coincided with MTV just being a couple of years old as well. So they put it on what's called heavy rotation. The video for Heart and Soul was on heavy rotations. That was really helpful too. So we were very quickly on our way.
When you actually released Heart and Soul, and it got to number 4, I think, in the US and the UK, and then you released China in Your Hand, was it a surprise for you when that got to number 1 for 5 weeks? Did that come as a surprise, or were you pretty confident it was going to be a big hit?
Oh, you're never confident in the music business, ever. You know, you're literally as... You know, you can have a massive hit and then just be nowhere with the next thing you release, and you'll have as much confidence in that song as the other one that you release. So, no, it came as a huge surprise, but we knew you get a thing called your midweek chart position, or you used to. I don't know how it works now. So on a sort of Wednesday, Thursday, we would get a kind of heads up on where the chart position was, and China in Your Hand, it went in at 43, so it went 43, 19. So we knew it had legs, 5, 1, and stayed there for 5 weeks. And aside from keeping George Harrison out of the number 1 spot in the singles charts, we simultaneously, our debut album, Bridge of Spies, was simultaneously at the number 1 spot for 2 weeks. And I kept Paul McCartney in the number 2 spot with his album. So, me.
Excellent. Something against your hometown, was it? You're from Liverpool, the best group ever until you came along from Liverpool. But what I want to know is, there you are, a girl from Liverpool, came from Huyton, your dad works in a supermarket. How did you get into the music industry?
Well, how can I shorten it? So mum and dad also had a musical side. So my dad was a brilliant pianist and used to play in all the clubs in Liverpool. And my mum was a pools clerk for Littlewoods, and she was a Littlewood songster. So they had a huge choir that used to tour around the UK. And she did Royal Command performance and everything, my mum, in that choir. So it's in the blood, it's in the blood. And they put their dreams aside when they had me and my brother and had more a conventional lifestyle. And so I never knew where I fitted in. I passed my 11 plus, went to grammar school, still felt like a fish out of water, fluffed my A-levels, so wandered around lots of different jobs, working in bars, shops, you know, did a bit of au pairing, went over to Europe for a while. And then when I was 22, I was on the dole. And I was put on what I think it was a YTS scheme, I think they called it then. And I got sent to the Ironbridge Gorge Museum to be part of the art department. And I just fell in love with all these bohemian people. So I decided to go back into education. I went back to the Shrewsbury, the Waiton School of Art in Shrewsbury. And in that environment, met a different kind of person, artistic, bohemian, more free thinking than the sort of great school I went to. I was so lucky to go there. It was very academic though, and I wasn't. And I was always singing along to the radio. And ever since I was a kid, people had always said, gosh, you've got a great voice, or you can harmonise so quickly to stuff. It was just a gift I had, but I didn't realise it could be a career. And someone said, go into a party. My mate's a guitarist. They need a singer. Come to the party. I did that. Met a guy called Julian Ward, joined a local band, and I was off. But I was 22 before I decided to give it a shot and had the confidence to give it a shot.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I can certainly see why you gave up working in a supermarket if you were fishing out kidneys. Music sounds better than that. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
You know
Have a great day. Bye.
Do you know what else? Looking at Carol there, see her hair, that mane of hair, that wonderful. Well, I have to say, I copied it. I used to have that mane of hair too. That was an iconic look in the 80s there. So now people are starting to ask serious questions about how good our health system here in the UK really is. That's according to Tim Knox, the author of the International Healthcare Outcomes Index, which recently placed the UK second to bottom across a series of major healthcare outcomes, including life expectancy and survival rates from cancer, strokes and heart attacks.
The study puts the UK healthcare system against 18 comparable countries and found that across 16 major healthcare outcomes, the UK comes bottom of the league 4 times.
Well, joining us to explain the findings in more detail is the author of the study, Tim Knox. So, hello. It makes for grim reading, does it not?
It is extremely grim. There's no getting away from it. And the important thing is that we all need to wake up and realise that the NHS is no longer the envy of the world.
And so, you know, was it when you came across these figures? I think you used the data from the OECD to compare different countries. Did it come as a surprise about how low down we were in these comparison tables?
My original inspiration was just to ask the very simple question: is the NHS any good, and is it getting better? I mean, these are perfectly normal questions I hope to ask. And so I discovered that, in fact, 3 leading independent think tanks, health think tanks, had asked the same question a few years ago. And so I used exactly their methodology, and I used, as you say, the OECD database, which does enable comparisons across countries. And the numbers really did appall me. It's extraordinary that we are bouncing along the bottom of the league table. And I think we should stress from the beginning that there's only one country that is worse than us. It is America. It would be crazy to even think about copying their system. It is ludicrously expensive. Their life expectancy is significantly lower than everyone else. And their outcomes for major diseases are dreadful. Unless you're very rich, don't go anywhere near America.
Now, people will say, well, the reason why the NHS will be so bad is because it's terribly underfunded and the government doesn't put enough money into the NHS. Is that something that will be borne out by your study? Does that explain why we're so far down the list?
No, absolutely not. Again, according to the OECD data, we spend 10.2% of GDP on our healthcare. That is exactly the average of the other 18 countries. And we are exactly in the middle of the league table. And that data is for 2019. Since then, we've been increasing our health spending far more rapidly than any other country. So no, sadly, it's not about money. It's not about the staff either. It's about the system.
And I was going to say that. What is it? So what could be altered or changed? Did you sort of go into that much detail when you were looking at these figures?
No. I think the first thing to do is to establish that there is a real problem with the NHS as a system. We can't consider really true reform of the system until the population and the political classes, I afraid I blame you or your gang.
Everybody else does, so you might as well join in.
Club, yeah, join the club.
Thank you. We all have to wake up and realise that the NHS is failing us, and the consequence is death.
Do you think that's the thing? Nobody wants to actually admit that. Nobody wants to say that because we've seen it as this iconic institution and we've never wanted to really face the problems there.
It's beginning to change. The latest British Social Attitude Survey, a huge survey that's been running for many years, done by the government, recently found that support for the NHS fell by its largest margin to such an extent that more people now question the NHS than support it. Support for the NHS has not been so low as it is today for 25 years.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because last year everyone was out clapping for the NHS, or 2 years ago clapping for the NHS.
We're clapping for the NHS workers,
staff, but not
the system.
Not the. I suppose that we've got to stop treating it as some kind of religion that can't be criticised and face up to some of these facts.
I think one of the real problems, ironically, is the fact that 75 years ago, when the NHS was first founded, it truly was the envy of the world. It was an extraordinary achievement in the aftermath of the Second World War to set up a health system free at the point of use. Sadly, every other country, every other economically developed country, has developed their own health systems since, and they have overtaken us by such a large degree that we are no longer the envy of the world. We are the sick man of the advanced world.
Tim Knox, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the results of your report. Coming up in the next hour, we're joined by a representative from Don't Divide Us, which is an organisation who wants to lessen so-called indoctrination in our schools.
We're also joined by our regular sports and showbiz commentators to look at the biggest stories of the weekend in those arenas. So don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, it's just gone 11 o'clock. Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil coming up in this hour.
We're joined by a representative from an organisation who want to stamp out what they see as indoctrination in our schools.
We'll also be catching up on the latest stories from the world of sports and showbiz.
All that coming after the latest news with Olivia.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. Here's the latest in the GB newsroom. In breaking news just in, a body has been found by police investigating the disappearance of a woman who went missing a week ago. Katie Kenyon was last seen getting into a Ford Transit van in Burnley, Lancashire. Officers say formal identification is yet to take place, but the family of the 33-year-old mother of two have been informed of the discovery. We'll bring you more on that story as we have it. A senior Tory MP says Conservative whips took too long to suspend Neil Parish over pornography allegations. Caroline Knox, who chairs the Women and Equalities Committee, accused them of dither and delay by leaving it until Friday. Mr Parish has not denied watching porn in the Commons, but suggests he may have opened the video accidentally. He's rejecting calls to stand down, saying he'll wait for the outcome of a parliamentary standards inquiry. Mr Parish was interviewed by GBNews 3 days ago. Before it emerged, he was the MP at the centre of the story.
I mean, I think the Whip's office will do a thorough investigation and we will wait and see that result. And I think, from that, then the decision will have to be made what action to be taken.
Labour is accusing a Conservative MP of wasting police time following calls for an investigation into claims Sir Keir Starmer broke COVID restrictions during lockdown. The Shadow Education Secretary told GB News Tory MPs were trying to pull the party into the gutter ahead of the local elections. Police have investigated the gathering, which took place at a constituency office in Durham in April last year, and decided no rules were broken. Bridget Phillipson says there's no comparison between that and the Downing Street parties.
Police have looked into the matter. There's no case to answer. No rules were broken. I can see why Tory MPs ahead of the local elections want to spend their time seeking to drag us all into the gutter and make out that we're all the same. But really, you look at the number of fines that have been issued at Downing Street, the fact that the Prime Minister lied to the British people, that he's lied to Parliament, that we've got the only Prime Minister in modern times to have broken the law to still be in office, and understand just why they're getting so desperate around this. Tory MP should know better than to waste police time on this.
The acting Premier of the British Virgin Islands insists there's no need for London to impose direct rule over the territory. It follows an inquiry set up in the wake of corruption allegations against the Premier, Andrew Fahey. He has appeared in a US court overnight over alleged drug trafficking and money laundering charges. The US has accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of brutality and depravity in his 2-month invasion of Ukraine. A Pentagon spokesman says violent and cruel acts have been committed against innocent civilians with utter disregard for their lives. Meanwhile, the UK Ministry of Defence says Moscow has been forced to merge and redeploy depleted military units after failed advances in northeast Ukraine. The brother of Kyiv's mayor, Vladimir Klitschko, says he's seen evidence of Russian war crimes in Ukraine.
Tortured, executed bodies of civilians with their hands tied behind their back, on their knee, and executed with the headshots. I've seen it with my own eyes, many, hundreds of dead civilians. It's just horrifying.
Meanwhile, the city of Mariupol is still under siege, with Russian forces focusing on the steelworks where hundreds of troops and civilians are stranded. Footage has emerged of Ukrainian soldiers in the steel plant singing the national anthem. It's as Ukraine's military say Russian forces continue to attack the eastern Donbas region, but have so far failed to capture 3 target areas. A cross-party committee is warning reforms are needed to stop hostile states buying access to MPs through all-party parliamentary groups. It comes after MI5 revealed that a female spy had been instrumental in setting up the Chinese in Britain group. The Commons Standards Committee has warned significant changes are needed to avoid what they're calling the next great parliamentary scandal. The Met Police is launching a new bid to overturn a High Court ruling which found officers breached the rights of organisers of the Sarah Everard Vigil in 2021. Scuffles broke out at the event between police and some of those taking part in the vigil. Reclaim These Streets has criticised the force for spending more taxpayer money after Scotland Yard said it would take the case to the Court of Appeal. But the Met says its appeal focuses on decisions and communications with Reclaim These Streets ahead of the event. In America, a bid to overturn Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking conviction has failed. That's despite her lawyers arguing that one of the jurors was biased after he failed to disclose he was a victim of sexual abuse. The judge concluded the juror was fair and impartial in the original court case. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil. Many of you have been getting in touch with us. Phil?
On Neil Parish, David says, before there's been any investigation, the entire media is damning this man. We all know that if we click on a wrong link, we can be subjected to porn or anything else. It has become a trial by the media.
And Tony says, along the same lines, if you accuse somebody of the slightest misdemeanour in Westminster, it is used for political gain. Why don't those offended embarrass the man there and then and slap his face and make a song and dance about it at the time?
Would you slap them in the face? Is that?
I don't know if I'd slap them in the face, but I would say, what are you doing? I think there's a point there. Could you not confront somebody at the time? You'd also get an explanation of what was going on, rather than not sort of knowing, and was it a mistake?
And on care homes, Elaine says, having worked in a care home through the pandemic, it was much safer for residents than being in a hospital. New residents were restricted to their bedrooms for 14 days in isolation, as to elderly patients mainly in wards of at least 4 others. In my opinion, what happened in care homes that let residents down was staff being moved from unit to unit, spreading COVID around, and that was due to bad management.
Marianne says the majority of care homes are privately owned and should take some of the responsibility. If they carried out barrier nursing as they should do, this could have saved lives too. Once the homes were aware of what was happening, they should have put precautions in place. We'll keep your views coming in. And with us now, going through the papers, Robert Taylor, what has caught your eye in Saturday's papers?
Well, I've got a Boris story for you. It's not our Prime Minister, it's Boris Becker, of course, who won Wimbledon 3 times, starting at the age of 17 in 1985. I remember because I was the same age, I am the same age as Boris Becker. And while I was doing nothing at school and being immature, he was winning Wimbledon. How the mighty have fallen. He's now, of course, going to prison, 2.5-year jail term. He'll serve half of that for failure to pay debts, for bankruptcy, essentially. And it appears that it results from a series of bad divorce settlements from his point of view, awful business deals and profligacy, spending £22,000 a month on a London property in the noughties. How can you blow 38 million? That's how you blow 38 million.
Yeah.
Do you think he should have gone to prison? I mean, some people are saying it seems a bit harsh. I mean, I think he should have gone to prison. In fact, he's stolen from other people who should have had that money that he was ferreting away. But are you in the camp?
Well, I do. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but, if you, as you say, fail to pay your debts, and if you take money from others, you have to pay the price. And I'm afraid, this is the law. He has to go to prison.
Now, I wanted to mention a story because some people may not know, I'm sure lots of people do know, but tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of Tony Blair becoming Prime Minister. And he's written an article on page 8 of the Daily Mirror today, which is headed, "Things did get better, but there are lessons for today." Now, the thing that always strikes me about Tony Blair, I say this often to my colleagues in Parliament, I only say it slightly tongue-in-cheek. I got into Parliament after the 2005 election, and I always say to my colleagues, sometimes in despair, that the most Conservative Prime Minister I've been in Parliament for is Tony Blair, which causes lots of people to get very aerated when I say it. But interestingly, in this article today, he explains why I sometimes say that. He didn't always act like a Conservative, but he certainly spoke like one. And in this article today, he writes here about the Labour wins when it builds out from the centre ground of politics and when it aligns with the thinking and hopes of the British people. They are patriots. They know a good economy is the sound foundation for social justice, that a tough line on crime is necessary to protect people, that immigration systems need controls and not just compassion for those wanting a better life. Now, a Conservative could say that. Now, I don't think he actually delivered it in terms of the number of people he let into the country. But I think there's just in that article a little glimpse to show why he reassured so many previous Conservative voters to vote for him?
Well, absolutely. In my lifetime, my political memory, there have been 11 general elections, and Labour has won 3, and they have all been under Tony Blair. Now, it's obviously, to me, it's obviously because he reached out to the centre ground, reached out to his opponents. The modern Labour Party is struggling to do that, and I think until they do that, they're going to struggle to win again. Despite all the advantages and all the scandal and gossip and lockdown and everything else, all those advantages that they've got at the moment, I still think they're going to struggle again in 2 years.
Well, it's interesting that he has got his finger on the button there, because a brand new poll that's just gone up on the Express now on the website has just said that Labour's lead has been cut to 5, Conservatives' lead has gone, not lead, but Conservative has gone up by 1, and that's because of the issues of sort of immigration, jobs, the war in Ukraine, and not going on about Partygate. So it's quite interesting, and that's sort of what he's painting the picture of. You've got to get, delivering what the people want delivered. Something different here in the Telegraph today, and this is Gove comes to Patel's aid to tackle the Mandarins, and this is the question about what is going on. It's bubbling all week, isn't it? Civil servants aren't at their desks. What are they doing? Well, this story is quite interesting. It's really talking about the Home Office and Priti Patel's battles, and they're saying really it's on 3 fronts. It's to do with the Rwanda new sort of policy that has come in. It's also to do with the Ukraine scheme, and it's also about this working from home culture. And what she's saying is actually it's nothing really to do with working at home and whether people should have the rights of working from home. They don't actually agree with the minister's policies, and it's a way of not delivering it. And I'm thinking, well, is that true? We've all been saying they need to get back to work. Jacob Rees-Mogg has taken photos of empty offices and left notes for them. Where are you? All I would say is we do need them back at work. It's a really important linchpin of what goes on in the country and what is delivered. And to have those people at the very, very top, not there, not knowing what's happening, I think it is important they get back. So I think it's a good question. Is it that it's about working from home, or is it that they don't want to deliver the policies of, in particular, the Home Office?
Well, I think it could be a bit of both, but obviously the civil service is there to deliver the policies of the government of the day. They can't pick and choose. It's the government that's been elected, so it's the government that must decide. I have to say, I think the Home Office has a bit to answer for here.
What other stories have caught your eye?
Well, on a sort of softer level, I noticed that the Loch Ness Monster is back in the news after about 30 years since we last saw Nessie. Nessie is back. Apparently, Nessie has been spotted, although the video...
Obviously, a quiet news day when they're bringing in the Loch Ness Monster.
Well, this is from the...
Scottish Tourism Board wanting to get people up there.
Exactly. Well, I have to say, I saw this video that apparently is the latest proof that Nessie exists. I watched it this morning. I knew I was going to be with you. Not at all. I saw a 2-minute video of a lake that was like a mill pond. There seemed to be nothing going on at all. So, as far as I'm concerned, this new proof, I'm afraid, doesn't prove anything.
Do you know the interesting thing is that Ron Pollard, who used to be the Director of Communications, I think, for Ladbrokes years ago, he said that if the Loch Ness Monster was ever found, Ladbrokes would be bankrupt because they'd taken so many bets on it.
Did you put one?
And he said he worked on the basis that if it ever did exist, it must be dead by now anyway. So he thought he was safe. But Ladbrokes will be having a heart attack when they read that article.
But I like this one, front page of the Daily Star, and that's "Thou shalt not be mean to the mother-in-law." The Pope says mother-in-laws are not the devils. We should be easy on them. That we should be nice to them. So there's the Pope there. Though he doesn't probably have a mother-in-law. does he? So maybe he can say these things. What does he know exactly? But are you cruel to your mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law?
But I would say that the Pope was also saying that people should have more children about 3 months ago. So he's commenting a lot on families at the moment. You would have thought he's the last person to do so, but there you go.
And there's a cracking photo of Les Dawson on the front of the Daily Star with the mother-in-law joke as well. Robert, thank you so much for joining us again this morning.
So, do you ever feel like you're being watched? In this studio, yes. Well, you wouldn't be wrong, because Britain is one of the most monitored countries in the world.
There are over 6 million surveillance cameras in the UK, more per citizen than any other country in the world except China.
This has been the case for a number of years, but recently it's started to seep into our workplaces, and one workplace where increased surveillance is happening is in the Met Police.
In an attempt to root out rogue officers, new technology will monitor their computer and phone messages as well as their movements.
On a grander scale, it was reported that controversial Israeli spyware called Pegasus has been used to spy on officials at Number 10 and the Foreign Office. So why is spyware technology being used more and more? Joining us to discuss this is cybersecurity specialist Professor Peter Summer. So, have you seen this increased use of spyware technology?
Well, yes. I mean, the reason they use it is because it's available and it's cheap.
So that's it. It's cheap. We can do it. So why shouldn't we be doing it? Is that the excuse?
Well, that would be the reason. Now, then, if you are worried about privacy and civil liberties, then you don't like what is happening at all. But on the other hand, the fact is, if you want to get something not as good as Pegasus, rather easier to detect, there are 20 or 30 or 40 packages available for immediate download. There'll be, some of them are completely free. The more sophisticated ones cost you just $100 a month to use. Now then, if you are interested in looking at people's private lives or their commercial interests, that's far cheaper than employing anybody to do it for you, infiltrating a private detective or something. So that's actually why the spyware is being used. Incidentally, the story in the Times, it seems to me, is not quite right. Police have been monitoring themselves for years. I mean, I act as an expert witness. I've been looking at cases like this for quite a long time. What the Met are actually doing is increasing the level of surveillance. It's not new at all.
I think, though, I mean, you're quite right. Some of it was talking about, if you're doing extra photocopying, they'll be wondering why you're doing that. They're saying if you're doing extra hours, could that be because you're in a financial strait? So I'm quite sure they've been monitoring sort of the police in that way for quite some considerable time. But they're saying they've got to do more now in this age of technology, looking at what went on with Sarah Everard, what they did and what they didn't know, what police were saying on WhatsApp groups. So it does seem that surveillance is going to increase, and maybe rightly so. Is this not a way to protect the public?
Well, we have a Data Protection Act, we have an Investigatory Powers Act, and some level of methods of enforcement and looking at oversight. That's the thing that's available. But people also have to make a judgment. I mean, both of you, you're MPs. How would you feel if the Westminster authorities say, we're worried about pornography, we're worried about people not declaring their covert interest when they make a speech. We think we're going to start introducing very large-scale surveillance on your private phones. I suspect we might get a bit of a pushback from you.
Well, what I will say, though, is we are sort of monitored as far as I can see all the time. We do have to declare things. We do have to put things on a website, sort of financial or otherwise. If you're in a company, we have got cameras watching us all the time, whether that is in any of the chambers. And of course, there are journalists with us all the time watching what we do. So I would say we were monitored more than probably anybody else. And we've got our opponents in our same workplace are only too happy to get rid of us. That's their job. So they will be, as it were, telling stories to the journalists in the House. So I would say that we are more monitored than anybody else.
My point, Esther, is not that I'm specifically trying to get at you. It just seems to me that this was an interesting example that the surveillance technology is available. It's the ethics of deciding how far you can go. And, the test should be, is it necessary and is it proportionate to the threat that is being perceived?
And I think that ethics is a very good point.
Peter, I just wanted to ask you about the Pegasus story that we saw about where the UAE were apparently fingered for being blamed for trying to spy on the UK government. I just wanted two quick questions that you might want to deal with at the same time. First of all, how do we know it's the UAE that's doing this when this software apparently is all over the world? And why does a country want to spy on an ally? I can see why you'd want to spy on one of your hostile states, but what's the need for spying on an ally?
Well, on the first of your questions, a lot of the work has been done by a Canadian outfit called Citizen Lab, and they claim to be able to see how Pegasus in particular is being deployed by looking at the location of various individual computers that are dotted around the world and which mediate the exercise. I've read some of their technical papers, and they seem to me to be plausible. To your second question, intelligence agencies, spy on their allies as well as on their enemies. There's a book I've recently been reading called The Black Door being door of number 10. And there's quite a lot of stuff about what the Brits did, not only to their allies in terms of, not only to their enemies in terms of intelligence gathering, but there are secrets that we in the UK may not necessarily want to share fully with the United States, despite the fact that we are good allies. UAE, I think, would have many more reasons for wanting to spy on us than we might have, say, on the United States.
Professor Peter Sommer, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight with us this morning.
But I do think, don't you think, we're looked at and spied upon more than ever as a nation of people. There's CCTVs, people have now got that Alexa or whatever in the house asking questions. People say, is it listening or watching us? I find that sort of the big brother is watching you all the time.
I'm all for CCTV, though. I'd have it down every street if it was down to me.
Yeah, but I don't like us being monitored all the time. Can't we have any privacy? Can't we?
Not when you're out in the street.
Yeah, but it seems, yes, but these Alexas are now in our homes. They're talking about spy software on your phones, and that is what you're saying, the audio, that is the camera, that's the visual, and they can turn it on you. I think it's all getting a bit of a sinister twist, all of this.
I'm sure you'll be using it on me if you can spy when I'm eating a full English breakfast somewhere and I hadn't disclosed it. I'm sure you'll be finding ways to monitor me.
Good point. I'll be getting that Pegasus straight away on your phone.
Coming up after the break, we're joined by a representative from Don't Divide Us, which is an organisation who wants to lessen so-called indoctrination in our schools. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. Snap part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Welcome back. It's 11:27. The organisation Don't Divide Us describe themselves as a wide range of people taking a stand against the divisive obsession with people's racial identities.
They say they are liberal anti-racists who reject the proposition that the UK is inherently racist in this day and age.
Join us now to discuss how critical race theory is taught in schools and to give us an insight into the organisation Don't Divide Us is Adrian Hart. Adrian, what is it that you're so upset about?
Well, I mean, the big problem for Don't Divide Us is actually the city where I live right now, Brighton, because it is the flagship of injecting a critical race theory-based version of anti-racism into its schools.
Can you tell us what critical race theory is for those who are not aware?
Well, critical race theory is a cluster of ideas which essentially are predicated on the idea that, in the case of Britain, that it is entrenched in what they would call systemic racism, something that is centuries old and hardwired into everyday life and indeed into the untutored minds of ordinary people. It's also incredibly divisive. It's more or less re-establishing racial divisions in the name of anti-racism, which I think makes it very, very dangerous. Insofar as it pushes itself into schools, that is the thing that we're pushing back against very hard in Brighton, because schools are the last place, I would say, that this should be happening. Kids are actually, and have been for many, many years now, inventing a model of, an intrinsic model of anti-racism that could teach the adult world a thing or two. I mean, they do it every day. And this kind of anti-racism is divisive. It just divides them up. It's kind of suggesting that white kids should feel a little bit guilty about themselves and that non-white kids are the victims of their own classmates. So in Brighton, the council got triggered, I think, to use their own favourite term, in the summer of 2020 by the killing of George Floyd 3,000 miles away, as though this had changed something in the classrooms and playgrounds of Brighton and Hove schools. So in another word,
I should just say this isn't about Brighton. This is something that's a nationwide a nationwide issue. I mean, is it something that we've got? I sense that kids are being taught to be sort of ashamed of their country. We've got so much to be proud of as a country, all the things that we've done and exported around the world, and yet there seems to be an agenda in lots of schools around the country of sort of, in effect, teaching kids just the bits that are the negative bits and saying, you should be ashamed of our country for what we've done. Is that what you see in schools around the country?
Well, that's coming into it. I mean, the reason I'm reporting from Brighton really is because it's so explicit there. It's calling itself critical race theory explicitly. It does indeed have an agenda to make kids kind of re-examine their national identity and their
moving away from Brighton, just to say, I mean, my concern is that we've got many children now leaving school after 14 years of education, probably £100,000 having been spent on them, and many don't have the basics in education as they leave. We've seen that. We've seen these figures come through. So what I want to know is, instead of teachers going off and learning about, and it is only a theory, their own theory, wouldn't we be better now spending more time with children to support them, particularly after the last 2 years of COVID, where they've maybe been at school, they've missed out on maths and English? Wouldn't we be better giving them a love of a subject and bringing them all together rather than separating them out? Shouldn't that be the focus of all teachers across the country?
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself, Esther. I mean, absolutely. There is nothing more unifying and intrinsically anti-racist, really, to have groups of kids from all different backgrounds and skin colours just coming alive in the classroom in relation to subject knowledge. And that is something that we used to do, and teachers are doing that. It's just that it's being interfered with by a kind of...
It seems like an industry is set up because you can buy magazines on this theory, you can buy courses on this theory. They're all taking days off to learn more about this theory. Really, they should just look at it as it's a sort of a new industry, and actually we need to get the focus away from that and to bringing pupils together.
Absolutely, and I hope that teachers and indeed parents will really push back against this, because I think that what's happening is that this is coming from above, that local authorities and consultants that are appearing in large numbers, wanting to go into schools and take over lesson plans and so forth. This is coming from somewhere else than that which is in the interest of children and parents.
Adrian Hart, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think Nadeem Zahawi said, I heard him say this earlier this week, the Education Secretary, that schools should be teaching children how to think, not what to think. And perhaps that sums it up quite nicely. Maybe the government needs to be doing more on this. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Adrian. And we're going to go to the news next, but afterwards we'll be catching up with all the latest sport and showbiz, so don't go anywhere.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Police searching for a woman who went missing a week ago in Lancashire say they've found a body. Katie Kenyon was last seen getting into a Ford Transit van in Burnley. Officers say formal identification is yet to take place, but the family of the 33-year-old mother of two have been informed of the discovery. A senior Tory MP says Conservative whips took too long to suspend Neil Parish over pornography allegations. Caroline Knox, who chairs the Women and Equalities Committee, accused them of dither and delay by leaving it until Friday. Mr Parish has not denied watching porn in the Commons, but suggests he may have opened the video accidentally. He's rejecting calls to stand down, saying he'll wait for the outcome of a parliamentary standards inquiry. Labour is we're bringing you pictures now of Ukraine. The US has accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of brutality and depravity in his 2-month invasion of Ukraine. A Pentagon spokesman says violent and cruel acts have been committed against innocent civilians with utter disregard for their lives. Meanwhile, the UK Ministry of Defence says Moscow has been forced to merge and redeploy depleted military units after failed advances in northeast Ukraine. A cross-party committee is warning reforms are needed to stop hostile states buying access to MPs through all-party parliamentary groups. It comes after MI5 revealed that a female spy had been instrumental in setting up the Chinese in Britain group. The Common Standards Committee has warned significant changes are needed to avoid what they're calling the next great parliamentary scandal. You're up to date. We'll bring you more at the top of the hour. Now it's time for a short break and we'll be back after that.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Your views have been coming in thick and fast.
I love this one. Jan says, my Saturday job as a 16-year-old was at a posh fashion shop called Nanette in Bowl Street, Liverpool. And she says, I think you're probably too young to remember it, but we had lots of celebs coming in and Ken Dodd was a regular visitor there. Fantastic.
I love Ken Dodd. Karen says, I worked in a shoe shop on menswear. I never progressed from menswear and thought I was a failure. Then the end-of-year sales list was posted on notice board and I was the highest seller. But because I was Saturday staff, I did not get the bonus as it was for full-time staff only. But then I knew why I was so exhausted by Saturday night. Karen, I'm gutted for you. That's absolutely outrageous.
It's not like she's borne a grudge all these years.
She should name and shame the company.
I've got Ken here says, I was one of 6 children and delivered milk on a Saturday morning, illegally at the age of 12. I caught a bus to the milkman's house about 5:30 in the morning. 2 policemen once told me to go home while I was waiting for the bus, as I was too young to work. I pretended to go home and caught the bus after they had gone. And he says, I wasn't allowed to keep the money. I bet you were. You said it was because you were taking back those empty milk bottles, but wonderful to hear all your Saturday stories, Saturday work stories.
Now, around 8,000 British soldiers are due to be sent to Eastern Europe to take part in military exercises in what will be the largest deployment to take place since the Cold War.
Troops will be placed in countries from Finland to North Macedonia, alongside dozens of tanks and more than 100 armed vehicles.
But how do you feel at home about this? Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joins us from Chetwynd Army Barracks in Chilwell in Nottingham. Will, what can you tell us?
Good morning. Yes, of course, as you were just saying, 8,000 British troops, around 200 tanks, armoured vehicles and artillery weapons making their way to Eastern Europe and Scandinavia to take part in these exercises. I will stress it's not getting involved in Ukraine directly. It's purely taking the opportunity to practice and prepare with NATO and Joint Expeditionary Force allies in places, as you said, like Finland, like the Latvian border with Estonia, like Northern Macedonia. The Queen's Royal Hussars, they're going to be taking part in some of these exercises in Finland, along with NATO troops from places like the US, from Latvia. There's also operations exercises, I should say, taking part in Poland right now, and plans for others throughout the summer. As you said, this is some of the biggest deployment for these sorts of exercises since parts of the Cold War. Tens of thousands of troops in some cases taking part. And of course, this is really in response to Russian aggression in the Ukraine. There was always plans to take part in these sorts of exercises, but it's been really accelerated and expanded in wake of what's been happening over the last couple of months. And of course, in places like this, in this part of Nottingham, there is a strong connection because of the military base here at Chetwynd. So I've been speaking to people in a local town just down the road in a place called Beeston to find out what they've been thinking when they hear the news that we'll be taking part in exercises like these.
First of all, I'd like to see a de-escalation. Obviously, everybody would. But in view of what's been emerging about the cares in the surrounding countries, to have support for them, I think, is very prudent, very essential. So it would be very good. I think it will also give some reassurance to the Ukrainians to know that they are not in this alone.
In my opinion, I served in Germany during the Cold War, when we had lots of troops to prevent Soviet expansion, and Putin seems to be carrying on very much the same attitude to expand the Russian Federation back to its old borders. So I think it's vital that we have troops there to deter his aggression.
Well, I'm glad to see the exercising, because I think they're going to need to go in, aren't they? It's just logic, that is. We've sat and watched it every day on the news, and it's horrendous. It's horrifying, isn't it? There's kiddies and everything. It's so terrible, terrible.
Well, I think what they needed to do was a long time ago is start doing something to threaten them back a little bit, I think, more than anything, because they've just sent a missile straight into a meeting last night saying that it was full of arms and it was just a meeting conference place. So I think, yeah, they need to do something seriously quick, I think. Basically, there's a lot of innocent people getting killed, and it's all right bringing the people over here. I agree with trying to help them, but at the same time, our infrastructure can't take it, the hospitals can't take it, all the extra people here, it needs sorting out pretty quick, I think.
If we don't get actively involved, and if we are just showing that we are willing to keep a presence in the area, and that President Putin's actions and statements are not scaring us, then I think that's something, yes, we should be proactive in saying that we will not bow to people bullying. But, especially the last few decades have proven, becoming involved in other countries' issues have been very problematic for both ourselves, the USA especially.
Well, of course, while there's tens of thousands of NATO and British troops taking part in these exercises, there really is only one person that it's intended for. Of course, Vladimir Putin. It's really a show of strength and a show of unity across Europe, particularly the Eastern European borders that might border Russian territories. And I think it's a really strong message that Britain and its allies will be hoping to give over this summer period while the Ukraine war continues.
Thank you, Will Hollis there, our East Midlands reporter. Thank you for that.
Now it's time for the sports and showbiz with Aidan McGee and Hayley Palmer. Aidan, we both might want to comment on this, but shall we start with Boris Becker in prison today?
Yeah, what a fall from grace. I mean, we all remember his accession, and the fall has been it took much longer, but it's been just as dramatic, you'd have to say. 2.5 years in prison, he's going to serve half of it on licence, he's going to be in Wandsworth Jail. But this is for the offence under the Insolvency Act of concealing assets. Now, when you're made bankrupt, as he was in 2017, you're meant to declare all your assets to see what can be taken to pay off any debts. Now, to give you a scale of what kind of stuff he concealed. I mean, this is a guy once worth £100 million. He concealed the sale of a car dealership in Germany worth £1 million. 3 Wimbledon trophies. Now, that shouldn't be dismissed as 3 silver pots. We saw recently just how much sporting memorabilia can be worth. Maradona's shirt, owned by the former England international Steve Hodge, is up for sale in Sotheby's at the moment, has already attracted a bid of over £4 million. So he claims not to know where his Wimbledon trophies are. He said he gave the President's Cup trophy that he won in 1985 as a gift to his mum, but he doesn't seem to know where he is. But there's also a luxury flat in Chelsea, unaccounted for, a loan of £700,000, £75,000 of shares in an IT company, and £360,000, which was just transferred to his wife. So I've seen this in football plenty of times, in other areas of sport. When the tap is turned off from these, the money that funds these lavish lifestyles, when it's turned off, it then becomes a real effort, a real transition to trying to adjust your life to the drop in income accordingly. And he's found that very difficult, and that's why he's in the mess, and that's why he's in prison today.
But he's lost touch with reality, hasn't he?
Oh,
in this regard, he's become a fantasist, and that's why questions were being raised. And how will he, in a way, survive in prison? I mean, what will it do to him in a very different way? How will he survive there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's overcrowded. 1,500,000, that'd be too many. 1,500 inmates. There's vermin apparently in there as well. It's not one of the best conditioned prisons, but it is only 2 miles away from where he lives in Wimbledon. He hasn't really earned serious money since 1999. That's when his tennis career stopped. And he's earned money since then, but he's had some bad advice. He's made some bad decisions. And when sports stars try to be business people, this is what can happen if the wrong advice is taken. It's a sad story.
Hayley, what do you make of Boris Becker?
Well, I know he's done wrong, but I did feel for him going into prison last night, just because, I mean, he's so successful and then gone to that. I think to watch anyone go into prison, you just feel how they're feeling, So, yeah, it's sad times for him and his girlfriend.
But I can't lose sort of sight of the fact that he has broken the law.
Yeah.
He has not paid his debts back to people. He's taken money from people, so this is what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But also, can I just say as well, he didn't learn his lesson. 2002, he had a suspended sentence for tax fraud in Germany. That's 20 years ago.
That's what I said, fantastic.
Now, Hayley, Esther wants to talk to you about toy boys. I don't know why she's so fascinated. Maybe it's because she's got one herself. But she always says it doesn't count. I don't count as a toy boy because I look older than her. So it doesn't count if you look older.
It was a waste of getting a toy boy, wasn't it, as far as most people are concerned?
She's got a fascination with it.
Because it has been in the papers, so whether we've got Madonna's toy boy, 35 years, I think it is, younger than her, but she's getting rid of him. Yeah. So she must be going for the younger one. So this is, I don't know how much younger you can get than 35 years younger. And you've got Thandie Newton as well, a toy boy at half her age. So this is, what's this all about? Have you got a toy boy? You want a toy? You're out at all the showbiz.
I mean, let's talk about Madonna. She's always had toy boys, hasn't she? Since Guy Ritchie, I think.
Yes.
So that's obviously her
She likes younger men.
She does.
But then she's always doing the surgery to look younger as well. So she obviously likes youth, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age, men need to go back to charm school. So as long as they have good communication skills and they're treating you nicely, I don't think it matters about the age. So I think it matters.
That's the way of maybe saying she likes older men.
No comment.
And Aidan, are you a toy boy to anybody?
No, not a toy boy, I wouldn't say. I don't think I've ever been a toy boy to anyone either. It was 11 years between Mum and Dad, but Dad was older. But no experience. I've known it being very successful, though. A cousin of mine is in a long-term relationship with someone who's about 15 years older than him. We all laughed at first when it happened, but
you're not laughing now.
Stayed together for 20 years.
I suppose what counts as a toy boy. If you're not counting me as a toy boy, what does? I mean, how
I think it's got to be over 10 years, hasn't it, for a toy boy? It can't be 5.
All right.
So about 8 years is enough. Sure.
8. Oh, here we go. Splitting hairs now. I'd say over a decade, and you're a toy boy.
Now, as we know, Hayley, you always get the best invites.
Oh, yeah.
You always get the best invites. And the one that we were most jealous of this week, I think, was we saw you with Blondie.
Yes, I went to see her at the O2. What an absolute legend. That O2 was absolutely rocking. And can I just point out, she is 76 years old. She's on the stage for a 2-hour set. I think she had a bottle of water with her. She stopped, maybe once. But I can't even do 2 hours in the gym. I just think she's an absolute.
So she's
icon.
probably got a toy boy.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. Yeah,
What's keeping her young?
She's absolutely incredible, and just obviously all her classic hits. You could just see everyone absolutely loved it.
You're a massive Blondie fan, aren't you?
Yeah. I guess she was, a sort of an icon as I was growing up, and I always say she was the lady that every woman wanted to be, but also the lady every boy wanted to date. I mean, she just was, funky, punky. She wrote all the words herself, stylish. Yes, I liked her.
Yeah,
feisty.
she's still got good style. She had like her glasses on, the red lippy, and she was owning it.
And how was her singing?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, I'm not a singer, I can't really tell, but her vocals were, she's just incredible. I don't think she had lost it at all. So, yeah.
Were you a Blondie fan?
No, not Blondie. I did see... I've seen veteran actor. I mean, I was like in Manchester a few years ago. I saw Fleetwood Mac, and I was fully expecting Stevie Nicks' voice to not be quite what it was. But you know what? She belted out all the best tunes I expected, and it sounded as good as they sounded back in the 70s. Not that I remember that far back, of course.
And we had Carol Decker on a little bit earlier, and she's got a phenomenal voice, China in Your Hands and all that. So she is absolutely belting it and on tour.
And what else have you been to see? What else can you make us jealous about this week?
Well, I went to see the preview of Downton Abbey. Are you Downton Abbey fans?
No.
You're not?
You know what?
Okay,
I am not.
No, I'm not.
Okay, this is going to go wrong then.
I'm not a Downton Abbey.
Tell us.
I think I'm out of touch by not being a Downton Abbey fan.
I have to say, I'm not a regular viewer. My parents are, and they were like, "Oh, you will like it." And the person I sat next to was actually crying at the end. I was like, "My goodness, are you okay?"
Yeah. Was it that bad?
So into it. So I think if you haven't seen it, give it a go, because you are quite fascinated by the costumes and the sets, and there's relatable things that go on. So it's not something that I would rush to go and see again, but I think you should try it.
Do you fancy it? I don't really fancy it, to be honest.
No, it wouldn't be my first choice. There's other things I want to see, but I do agree with you on the costumes. Yeah. I do agree with you, sort of the glamour of it all. So I do quite like the look of that.
Yeah.
And then, Aidan, quickly on Chelsea. What's the situation on the Chelsea scene?
Well, the owner of the LA Dodgers looked to be getting the club yesterday. He was announced as the preferred, or he's set to be announced as the preferred bidder. That's Todd Burley. £2.5 billion. And then from left field last night, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the chairman of Ineos, just makes this phenomenal bid, a British bid, £4.25 billion for this football club. So there's a lot of the other bidders who've been stood down and told they're unsuccessful have been a bit perplexed by this, because the deadline was March the 18th. And this bloke can come in, I suppose money talks at the end of the day, but I think that if you're looking at the size of the bid and the fact that it's British, he's probably got quite a good chance of getting Chelsea now.
Or is it one of those you pretend you have all that much money, but the closed date, the date is closed and you won't actually be viewed, but you've got your name forward?
No, I think he might do. Nadine Dorries said earlier in the week, the culture secretary, that Chelsea are on borrowed time. It has to get done pretty quickly. So I think he's serious. Also, because he nearly bought the club, or he looked into buying the club 3 years ago in 2019. He's also done the diligence. He doesn't need to inspect the books. They haven't changed that much in the COVID period since. So it could be a fast-tracked bid. And who knows, in a week's time, it could be back in British hands for the first time since 2003.
Well, you will be back with us next week.
I will.
So you'll let us know what has gone on, and hopefully that. And Hayley, you'll be back with us next week too. So thank you both very much indeed. Now, every month of the year, it's either used to celebrate or build awareness around a particular issue.
And the month of May is no different, because it's National Pet Month, starting tomorrow. It aims to raise awareness of responsible pet ownership and celebrates the many benefits of having a furry companion.
Joining us now to discuss this is the head of Companion Animal Science and Policy, Dr. Sam Gaines. Hello. So tell us, what's the main message that you're delivering today?
Morning, thanks for having me on. So, I mean, absolutely, we're delighted that we've got this month dedicated to pets, and obviously a lot of our messaging around this time is just going to be helping people make sure that they are responsible and that they know exactly what they need to do to keep pets happy and healthy. And I think at the moment this is particularly timely, because unfortunately we are seeing a large number of people really starting to struggle because of the COVID pandemic that thankfully we're obviously coming out of, but that has caused major problems for some families, and we're seeing that being compounded by the cost of living crisis as well. So we are really sort of reaching out to help people, and also urging them that if they are struggling to please, reach out to the RSPCA, other charities, and we're here to help them.
Do people underestimate the cost of having a pet?
Yeah, I think we definitely saw that during the pandemic. So I think, for a lot of people, it felt like the perfect time to bring a new pet into their home. And we saw, the probably unprecedented levels of interest around getting pets. But because of that, I think it's fair to say that not everyone spent the time that we would recommend spending ensuring that they can actually provide that commitment, that responsibility, and that they've got the money to actually give that animal what they need, because ultimately they're reliant upon us to give them everything they need to be happy and healthy. And so sadly, we have seen that, through changes in circumstances that might have been unforeseen, and just for some people, just that unexpected cost has meant they've had to make some really difficult decisions. And in some cases, it has meant that they've had to give their pets up because they just haven't been able to meet that financial commitment or the commitment that their pet actually needs just on a regular basis in terms of exercise provision or feeding, veterinary bills, for example.
Gaines, thank you so much for joining us and raising awareness about National Pet Awareness Month, and we wish you well with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, earlier, a guest mentioned Brighton Council briefly before we moved them on due to us being in a council election period. Now, the full City Council elections for Brighton and Hove will take place on Thursday, the 4th of May, 2022. However, there is the Rottingdean Coastal Ward by-election on Thursday, the 5th of May, 2022. So the full election's 23, but there is one in 2022. Due to that by-election, we just want to read out all of the candidates. And here we've got Libby Darling, the Green Party candidate. We've got Linda Christine Hyde, the Conservative Party candidate. Robert McIntosh, the Labour Party candidate. And Stuart Malcolm Stone, the Liberal Democrats. And Stephen White for the Independent. And Alison Marie Wright, an Independent. So we thought we'd better get clear all that situation. Thank you for watching us. We'll be back next week. Don't go anywhere because Alistair Stewart and Friends is next. But here's the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. This bank holiday weekend starts off chilly for many, but with plenty of sunshine across much of the UK. Not for all. It is going to turn increasingly damp in the north. That's because an area of low pressure is now approaching. The weather fronts associated with it have been bringing thicker cloud into the northwest and outbreaks of rain, and that's how things start really for much of the UK. It's bright for eastern and southern Scotland, plenty of sunshine for England and Wales despite the chill in the air, but in the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, rain soon turns up, and that rain becomes more persistent and in places heavy, particularly over western hills and coasts of Scotland. Spreads to eastern and southern Scotland, parts of the far north of England through the afternoon. But away from that, we keep the sunny spells, and actually it's a warmer day compared to yesterday, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius. Certainly notice the difference in the east of England. But during Saturday night, we're going to see those spells of rain push south into northern and western England, Wales as well. Again, some heavy bursts at times, but increasingly that rain is becoming more fragmented as it moves south. Nevertheless, the extensive cloud across the UK by dawn tomorrow means that it's going to be a frost-free start. Temperatures in some places hold up at 10 Celsius. And in the far southeast, I think it'll stay dry through much of the day. Scotland and Northern Ireland also brightening up, drying up, some bright spells coming through, albeit with a few showers here and there. Likewise, eventually for Northern England. But elsewhere, well, we keep the dreary skies, we keep the damp conditions. That'll impact the temperatures, just 11 Celsius there in Cardiff, 11 in Plymouth, I think 13 or 14 further north, feeling a bit more pleasant. And Bank Holiday Monday itself doesn't look too bad. I think there'll be sunny spells, but